We're now joined by Dr. Elizabeth Matto, who is professor and director of the Center for Youth Political Participation at the great Eagleton Institute of Politics at Rutgers University. And I'm not just saying that because they let me out of there with a master's degree a long time ago. Elizabeth, let's do this. I mean, you understand youth participation better than most. Question about January 6th. January 6th, the insurrection, so much to talk about, so meaningful, so impactful, if you will. What impact do you think it's had on younger voters or non-voters?
Well, I think, Steve, and thank you for having me today. I think like so much that has happened in the last few months, in the last few years, it was a teachable moment for those of us who teach civic engagement and democracy. I think one more example for us, how important it is that we're teaching our students to pay attention to politics and helping them understand the importance of participating in politics and teaching democracy. I think in many ways, what happened on January 6th certainly can be attributed to many, many causes. But one that I think is really important is some real gaps in understanding about the roots and the underlying tenets of American democracy. So if anything, I think it really underscores the importance of teaching American democracy.
Professor, how do we get younger people to connect politics to their lives as opposed to that's politics?
Well, again, I think we're seeing so many examples. As you probably know, Rutgers has been teaching remotely for the last year now. I think we have so many examples in this last year about the importance of politics, the connection to politics, the connection of politics to our day-to-day lives. The combination of the government's reaction to COVID-19, to the Black Lives Matter movement. I think students have seen one example after another of how politics impacts their daily life. And so I think we're seeing examples all over the place. And again, I think it's really heightening the interest in American politics among young adults, among a generation that I think has already shown an inclination to be politically involved. So I think we're seeing example after example of why politics matters, and more importantly, why young people matter to politics.
Civic education, define it.
Well, I would say civic education is fostering an inclination and a skill set among young adults to participate in the democratic process. You know, as we frequently say, knowing how to be a democratic citizen is not genetic. It needs to be taught. And there's a growing body of literature on how to teach civic education, how to teach American democracy. What we do know, if we're going to define it, is it's multifaceted. For sure, it's about imparting a sense of knowledge, knowing, having a good sense of democratic processes, who serves in government. But almost more important is having a skill set, knowing how to participate in the political process, having the cognitive skills, the participative skills to be engaged in American democracy, and even more importantly, a democratic mindset, a democratic attitude, a sense that your participation
Democratic with
matters.
A small d. I'm sorry.
Absolutely, absolutely. Democratic with a lowercase d. And certainly when it's taught, it should be taught with that mindset, certainly being nonpartisan, but being pro-democracy.
And by the way, there's an Are You Voting initiative, an Are You Ready initiative, a whole range of initiatives. Let's make sure we put up the website for people to find out more about those programs. But I need to ask you this.
Yes.
The political divide, the polarization, listen, you watch that news program, I watch this news program, so my reality is different from your reality. The implications of that level of bifurcation, if you will, and separation, and the enemy of the people. We know who said that. What are the implications, from your perspective, for younger people trying to find sources of information that are credible and are not riding any horse politically or for or against anyone else? I know that's a loaded question, but here in public broadcasting, we don't have, quote, a point of view.
Mm-hmm. I think it's incredibly frustrating for students. I think, again, I think we're seeing so many signs that young adults want to be engaged in politics. We've been home. Our students have been teaching. I've been teaching remotely. My students have been learning remotely. They're on their laptops all the time. So they are seeking quality, reputable, reliable information. They want to be following politics, but they recognize that they have to, when digesting the news, that they have to have a healthy grain of salt, take it with a healthy grain of salt. So I think it's frustrating for students. I think millennials and Gen Z in particular are finding the bifurcation, as you mentioned, finding it frustrating, finding it difficult when there are problems that need solved, and yet they're being slowed down and mired in political polarization. So I think, again, as an educator, my job is not only to try to point students to reputable news organizations or to help them digest, consume news critically. I think even more importantly is our ability to teach students to talk to each other, to engage in political discussion, to do it in an honest way, a candid way, but in a respectful way and a productive way. And the classroom, even the Zoom classroom, is a location to do that kind of teaching and that have that kind of political discourse.
It's so interesting you talk about that, because there's so much discussion about, hey, don't talk to anyone in your family or friends or whatever about politics because you know what could happen. You believe the opposite. Engage each other. Listen to other points of view respectfully, even if you think someone's dead wrong.
Absolutely. I recognize that it's very difficult to have political conversations right now, but I also recognize that we have we're in trouble. American democracy is in trouble if we can't engage in discussion. The system was set up in such a way, back to Federalist Paper 10 and 51 and James Madison, the system was set up. The system is set up in such a way that we are going to have disagreements. It was set up in such a way where it was going to be a pluralist society where we were going to have a diversity of views. But the goal was that we were to exchange these views, and out of this exchange would come compromise. Clearly, having political discussion right now is, fraught with anxiety, terribly difficult. But back to my original point is, if we're not taught how to do it, if we're not taught how to do it, how will we ever do it?
And we don't have to pick sides, if you will, or demonize those who see the world differently than we do. And that is exactly what Dr. Elizabeth Matto is talking about and promoting. And we're going to have other folks from the Eagleton Institute on to help us put things in perspective, because that's why, when you saw throughout this segment, democracy at a crossroads, that's why we're doing it. Professor, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me. Take care.
You got it. I'm Steve Adubato. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.
State of Affairs with Steve Adubato is a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation. Funding has been provided by New Jersey Sharing Network, Summit Health, Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey, NJM Insurance Group, the Healthcare Foundation of New Jersey, IBEW Local 102, the Fidelco Group, ADP, and by Fedway Associates, Inc. Promotional support provided by NJ.com and by the New Jersey Business and Industry Association.
Hi, I'm Joe Roth. In New Jersey, there are nearly 4,000 residents in need of a life-saving organ transplant, and one person dies every 3 days waiting for this gift of life. One organ and tissue donor can save 8 lives and enhance the lives of over 75 people. You have the power to make a difference and give hope. For information or to become an organ and tissue donor, visit www.njsharingnetwork.org and be sure to talk with your family and friends about this life-saving decision.